Black Cave Tragedy. In April 1995, Thomas Edward Benning decided to explore Black Cave in Arizona. He'd been there before and knew the terrain well. Confident and experienced, he entered alone, carrying nothing but an electric miner's lamp. No helmet, no backup gear, no shirt. The entrance was familiar and Thomas moved through the early passages with ease. But deep inside, something new caught his eye. A narrow side tunnel he had never noticed before. Curiosity got the better of him. He veered off the main route and entered the passage. He kept walking, crawling, twisting through the tight rock. But after some time, he realized he was lost. He turned back, but every direction looked the same. After an hour, he still couldn't find the main path. Then the worst happened. His lamp began to flicker. A few minutes later, it went out entirely, leaving him in complete darkness. With no flashlight, no sense of direction, and no help, Thomas was alone, miles underground. He reached for the only other light source he had, a small box of matches. He lit one. It cast a weak, flickering glow across the rock walls. He kept moving, match after match, but they burned out fast. Soon, he had nothing left. To avoid going in circles, he began leaving behind small personal items to mark his path. Hungry, thirsty, exhausted, he stumbled through the darkness until he came upon a fissure in the rock, a narrow vertical crack about 4 feet deep. It could be a way out, maybe even a connection to a bigger passage. With no other choice, he lowered himself in feet first. Then he stopped. His hips dropped below the narrowest point and he was stuck, completely wedged in. He couldn't go down. He couldn't pull himself up. He tried everything. Nothing worked. Trapped in silence, alone. Back home, his wife noticed he hadn't returned. Worried, she called the police. The search began, but Thomas hadn't told anyone where he was going. Authorities scoured multiple caves. Days passed. Finally, they found his car parked near Black Cave. Rescuers went in and searched the mapped areas. They found his glasses, his shirt, but they missed the hidden passage, the one he had followed. Incredibly, Thomas was still alive, but time was running out. His condition was deteriorating. Rescue teams eventually called off the search. He was officially declared missing. His wife refused to give up, but she wouldn't get answers for a long time. It wasn't until December 1996, over a year and a half later, while 3 cave explorers searching Black Cave found a narrow passage in unmapped section. Inside, they found Thomas's body. He had never made it out, and there, in the dark, trapped between the rock walls. Mossdale Cavern Incident. It was June 24, 1967, when 10 young cave explorers set out to explore Mossdale Cavern in North Yorkshire, England. Their goal? To push deeper into the uncharted parts of the cave and complete a map out some deeper passages. Among them were 2 experienced leaders who had explored Mossdale before. Their confidence inspired the others, even though the cave was notorious for its tight spaces, with very few areas where a person could fully stand. Just hours into the expedition, 4 members had already seen enough. They made the decision to turn back and return to the surface. When they emerged, they noticed the skies had turned dark with rain. The storm was building, but at the time, it didn't seem urgent. Back underground, the remaining 6 explorers were crawling through one of the tightest and most dangerous parts of the system, a section known as the Far Marathon. It was barely 18 inches by 12 inches. As they worked, rain began to fall. At first, it seemed like nothing serious, but on the surface, things quickly turned dangerous. Water levels inside the cave started rising fast. Realizing the danger, the group inside decided to head back, but they were still 3 hours from the entrance. By the time the surface team realized what was happening, it was too late. A lake had formed around the entrance, sealing the explorers inside, and they just ran to get help. The 6 trapped explorers had no idea how much water was about to rush in. They frantically searched for higher ground, but the cave was merciless. The water kept rising, pressing against their faces. Rescuers and hundreds of volunteers worked tirelessly, pumping water out and oxygen in, hoping they had found a safe chamber. But in the end, every single one of them drowned. Sterkfontein Cave. It was September 29, 1984, when 3 cave explorers were exploring unmapped sections of the Sterkfontein Cave in South Africa. Leading the group was Nuno Gomes. Alongside him were his friends Peter and Malcolm. They wanted to lay a guideline all the way to the farthest point of the wet cave area, a chamber known as Milner Hall. The plan was simple. Nuno would dive in, lay the line, and Peter and Malcolm would assist from outside the water. Nuno plunged into the water and successfully laid a 396-foot guideline from the entrance to the Milner Hall. With the job done, the trio decided to go back in, this time together, and follow the line to the end. Once they reached the air pocket at the back of the cave, they were satisfied that they had successfully mapped this cave section. But as they turned around and started swimming out, something went wrong. Nuno felt Malcolm tapping him underwater. Peter was no longer behind them. They turned around and found that Peter had wandered into a side tunnel. Nuno tapped him, signaling for him to return to the main line and head back. But just minutes later, he disappeared again. This time, Nuno and Malcolm assumed think Peter had taken a different route out, avoiding the tight squeeze they had used, so they didn't go back to look for him. But when they surfaced, Peter wasn't there. Nuno and Malcolm quickly re-entered the cave, searching the tunnels, but Peter wasn't there. And the water was now filled with silt. Visibility had dropped to 0. After 4 hours of searching and with their tanks nearly empty, they had no choice but to return to the surface and call for help. And police divers arrived later that evening. The silt was so stirred up that visibility was heavily impaired. The police called off the search for the night, convinced they would now be searching for a body rather than a survivor. But Peter wasn't dead. Somewhere in the dark, in a side tunnel off the main path, Peter had gotten lost. He eventually found a small air pocket chamber and decided to wait for rescuers. He tried everything, flashing his light into the water, banging his tank against the rock, but no one came. That first night, he slept in complete darkness, unaware that the police had sealed off the cave. No one else was allowed in. And because the water remained cloudy for days, the police delayed the search, convinced no one could survive that long underground. On October 6th, 7 days after Peter's disappearance, they returned, but still, no sign of Peter. Meanwhile, Peter was still alive. He had now spent 14 days in total darkness, without food, starving, and exhausted. At one point, he decided to try escaping on his own. He followed a tunnel for 120 feet, hoping it led to safety, but it was a dead end. So, he went back to the small chamber and waited. After 6 weeks, and with no sign of him, the police ended the search altogether. That's when volunteers stepped in, trying to find a connection between the dry and wet parts of the cave. And Nuno Gomez was one of them. And it was Nuno who made the key discovery, a connection to the wet section that no one had noticed before. Inside, they found footprints, Peter's footprints, leading to a small chamber, and just a few feet beyond that, his body. Beside him was a note. It read, "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." The autopsy confirmed it that Peter had died of starvation. He had survived alone, in complete darkness, for 3 weeks. Gollum's Cave. On August 18, 2005, 5 friends set out to explore the Gollum's Cave, but a cave known as the Cave of Death because of how dangerous it was. They arrived at the entrance around 3 a.m. One of them decided to wait outside, while the other 4 entered. Right from the start, they faced challenges. To even get in, they had to crawl through a pool of water. Inside, the path forked. They went left. That decision led them to another pool of water. It connected to another section of the cave through a narrow underwater tunnel, just 3 to 4 feet wide. You had to fully submerge, swim about 15 feet in total darkness, and trust that you'd find air on the other side. One by one, they slipped into the water and swam through. When they emerged, they found a small chamber with barely 3 feet of airspace above the water, just enough to breathe. But something was wrong. This was what cave explorers call bad air, a toxic mix of low oxygen and high carbon dioxide. It weakens the muscles and makes it nearly impossible to think clearly or hold your breath for long. As they tried to escape, the first person dove into the tunnel, but disoriented, panicking, and running out of breath, he couldn't find the way out. He drowned. Then the next person tried. Same result. One by one, each friend entered the tunnel hoping to escape, only to find the bodies of the others and meet the same tragic fate. Meanwhile, the friend outside grew anxious. No voices, no splashes, just silence. He entered the cave, called their names, but heard nothing. He backed out and called for help. Rescuers soon arrived. They pumped oxygen into the cave, tried to drain water, but it was too late. All 4 had died inside, and Gollum's Cave was sealed with cement, closed off to the public for good.